I never got around to reviewing episodes 6, 7, and 8 of The Mandalorian. That's 1, 2, 3, but you get my point. So I'm just going to kind of squish them all together and talk about generally my feelings of those episodes, and then my general feelings about the series overall, or the season that we've gotten so far of the series, what that could mean for season 2, and in my opinion, most importantly, what it could mean for the future of Star Wars in general, underneath Disney's gigantic, ominous, slightly dystopian tinged corporate umbrella. I loved episode 6. It was pure Star Wars-y fun. It didn't have a whole ton of theme building other than giving us a general feeling of what The Mandalorian used to be, who The Mandalorian used to be, as well as some slight world building stuff about what general people in the galaxy, or at least the underworld of the galaxy, or at least this specific section of the underworld of the galaxy, feels about Mandalorians. And it was just fun, and it was funny, and it was strange, and it had weird cameos from nowhere. Like we got Matt Lantern playing a rebel prison guard guy. The guy that played Anakin, by the way, in the Clone Wars. He voices Anakin in the Clone Wars. And then you got Deborah Chow, Rick Famuyiwa, and Dave Filoni all playing X-Wing pilots in not the greatest acting, not Oscar-winning acting. And you know what? In a lot of ways, even those are kind of, in my opinion, they're kind of part of the spirit of Star Wars, is that weird, like, wait, that doesn't fit, that you get in Star Wars all the way back to A New Hope. The Dianoga is just weird. Like, why is there a trash monster? That doesn't make any sense. And like Bill Burr playing a relatively major character, it just, okay, cool. I like it. But in general, episode 6 very heavily leans on the Mandalorian's past. Who was he? Who was he before he became a bounty hunter? Or did he have a weird, wild past where he maybe left the Mandalorians for a while and then came back? Or, you know, whatever. We end up running into that weirdness, right? And clearly he was a darker character back then. He did do not necessarily sketchy criminal stuff, because he's always kind of not really inside of the bounds of the law. Or at least he's ruthless about how he acts. You know, you're going all the way back to episode 1. I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold. Now, on to episode 7 of The Mandalorian. Honestly, it was kind of all, it just kind of felt like sort of a lead up to episode 8, which makes sense to me. Really, the hardest hitting bit was obviously Queel. Queel's death in episode 8 is just, or episode 7 is just absolutely bananas. I've got to start saying chapters, because if I keep saying episodes, people are going to start thinking I'm talking about or I'm going to start thinking about that I'm talking about the saga movies. Anyways, in chapter 7, Queel was just, he's such a wonderful character. I absolutely adore him. Him, you know, bringing back IG-11, and we get little bits and pieces about Cara Dune, and about how she just really's got a thing. Like, Mandalorian's got a thing about droids, Cara's got a thing about Imperials, both of which for relatively reasonable reasons, which we'll get into when we talk about episode 8. Reasonable reasons. I'm good at words, guys. Really, the death of Queel was, to me, meant to sort of signify that these are not superhuman characters. We're not in the saga films where the main characters don't die, with the exception of Padme and arguably Anakin. But really, the main hero characters aren't really in any serious peril. Keep in mind, I'm coming at this from somebody who was born in 1990, so the whole Han frozen in carbonite thing, that wasn't, you know, that's just not part of my what is it? What's the term? Zeitgeist, I think is the term. I might be wrong. I'm sure somebody in the comments will tell me I'm wrong. But this is the point where we really learn that, okay, even if you're a good person, even if you're a good fighter, even if you're a wise person like Queel, you're not necessarily guaranteed to survive. We're in Rogue One territory. This is where we got that definition of the tone of the season, in my opinion. All in all, Chapter 7 was very good. Chapter 8, on the other hand, Chapter 8 was, to me, one of the best pieces of Star Wars content we've ever gotten. I adored, good Lord, Moff Gideon. Let me just talk about the goofiness, about the goofy things that I love. Moff Gideon, this is technically end of Chapter 7, but Moff Gideon, he's got like an elevator thing that like rises him up out of his TIE fighter, and that's the most melodramatic director Krennic level drama BS, and I love it. And him just like explaining what an E-Web blaster is just ridiculous. We're back onto Chapter 8 now, but I love that kind of stuff. I love it when Star Wars just is somewhat self-aware about its goofiness and its weirdness, and I love those. All in all, just not even including Star Wars, I love those types of villains. The villains that like overly monologue and just kind of are just like, you just kind of want to punch them in the face. Like, you're not really scared of them necessarily, but you just kind of want to punch them in the face. And Moff Gideon plays that type of villain very, very well. He fills that role very, very well. But he does such a fantastic job of delivering the weird, awkward dialogue that I think Star Wars should be famous for and should remain to be famous for. More on Chapter 8. Just thematically and dramatically, it is so well done. This is where you get to see, in my opinion, this is no hits on Bryce Dallas Howard at all whatsoever, which is the only other episode that Cara Cynthia Dune is in. But this is what happened, or necessarily even a hit on Gina Carano, but Gina Carano frickin' brought it. And this is what happens when you give this type of story and this type of character to a much more experienced director that knows how to work with actors super well. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, no hits on Bryce Dallas Howard. I loved Chapter 4, but she's just not as experienced of a director. She probably just is, and she's also exploring what this character is. And, you know, I'm sure that while they were shooting stuff together-ish, and, you know, they get all mixed up and everything like that, I'm sure that Taika Waititi, who directed Episode 8 or Chapter 8, got to watch dailies and stuff of Gina Carano playing Cara in Chapter 4. Just had a brain fart. Just there's this weird subtlety when when Moff Gideon says Cara Cynthia Dune of Alderaan. There's just this weird little it's that wave of emotion thing that only like Adam Driver has done, really. You know, I always go back to like David Tennant could do this when he was playing the Doctor in Doctor Who. Just that weird, like, you can see like 8 or 9 different emotions just kind of rippling across the expression of this character, this actor. And there's just like a little bit of fear, a little bit of confusion, a little bit of anger, a little bit of resentment, a little bit of remembered pain. I absolutely adored it. And then her talking to Din Djarin, or the Mandalorian, while he's injured, lying on the floor of the cantina. It was good. It was real damn good, in my opinion. And then obviously IG-11's death is just incredibly powerful and moving, and we get all the pieces kind of come together from the previous 7 chapters of this show, or this season, where we just get to see okay, this is exactly what happened to Din Djarin, and this is exactly what happened with Cara Dune, and this is exactly the past of, the Mandalorian culture in general, and we get clear, hard definitions, especially with that conversation with the armorer. Clear, fine lines of exactly what the setting is doing to these characters. What kind of effects does the setting and the sociological status of the galaxy how does that impact these characters? Now let's talk about overall themes for this show, or this season at least of this show. And the number one thing that I'm thinking about is purpose, and finding your purpose and finding your belonging, as well as like a hell of a lot of adopted family. The beautiful thing about The Mandalorian season 1 is, to me, the fact that the biggest of those three themes that are normally in every single Star Wars thing, found family, in general just a sense of belonging, and then a sense of purpose. Of those three, which all can be kind of wrapped up into one, in my opinion, there are certain nuances that kind of separate them in my mind. But The Mandalorian season 1 just really managed to tell those themes very beautifully while telling it from a different perspective. Because in the Clone Wars, in Rebels especially, in the sequel trilogy, in the original trilogy, even in the prequel trilogy, that sense of finding a family or finding a belonging is always told from the perspective of the young identifiable hero, Luke, Anakin, Ahsoka, a hell of a lot of Ezra, etc. And them finding a group and then becoming part of that group. Rey choosing to be a part of the Skywalkers and the Skywalker legacy. The Mandalorian tells that very differently. It's two lost souls finding one another, and one of them taking on an almost parental role and caring about something outside of himself. This is, as much as I love Cara Cynthia Dune, as much as I love Greef Karga, as much as I love IG-11, as much as I love Kuiil, this is purely, there's a reason why it's called The Mandalorian. That is who this character is. That is who this show is. It is all about Din Djarin and his journey. It is completely deadlock, completely centered on just him, all the way from chapter 1 through chapter 8. This is about him stepping out of himself, stepping out of that armor in a way, stepping out of that sort of, I'm just going to be off to the side. I don't want anything to do with any greater causes. I don't want anything to do with any greater meaning besides just trying to help rebuild the family that I've found, or the family that saved me in the Mandalorians. Or at least in this particular Mandalorian culvert. We get to see the Mandalorian stepping away from just trying to help people who took him in, people who raised him, people who trained him. He's stepping out of that part, and he's taking on this new signet. He's creating a new clan of two. For me, while I love my biological father very, very, very much, and I see him just as much as my father as I see my stepdad is also a massive part of my life. And for me, that hit me really hard. Seeing both as somebody who is planning on becoming a father in the next few years, and as the son of a step parent, I can see it from both perspectives. Obviously, I don't mean this in a weird way, but that's sort of that marriage in between Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian. It is about the Mandalorian all of season 1 can be very easily wrapped up into the Mandalorian becoming more than just a cog in the machine, both the machine of the Bounty Hunters Guild and the machine of the Mandalorian culvert that he's a part of, and the Mandalorian way of life, and being a sort of an angry young man who wants to commit violence and is very, very good at committing that violence, into somebody who is a protector, somebody who is more than a warrior but now a protector. Now that brings me on to season 2 and what I'm expecting from it. Keep in mind, speculate and expect responsibly. Don't get too hinged onto any ideas, and I'm trying to do that myself, but I'm really expecting season 2 to open up, and I'd like season 2 to open up the world a lot more. Let us see what happened with the Mandalorians, what is their current status, really. Are there other Mandalorian refugee groups, or what is the New Republic up to? Let's figure out what's the status of the underworld after Jabba is gone, and then probably the New Republic has cracked down a lot on the underworld. What is the status of the Imperial remnant that didn't go off into the unknown regions? Because keep in mind, this whole Outer Rim area is literally on the opposite side of the galaxy from those unknown regions where the First Order came to rise. So how is that going to work? And I'm really expecting us to get... I'm right now, my biggest prediction that I'm going to die on this hill fighting for and hoping for. I won't be disappointed if we don't get it, but I'd really like this to happen. It's a pure net positive for me if it does happen. But I really, really, really want to see Sabine or Bo-Katan or any sort of Mandalorian that at least was around that isn't quite as cryptic as the Armor. Keep in mind, I love the Armor so much, but she's very religious leader, guarded, and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm really hoping that we get to see just more context for what this, even more of what this world is, and what now we've seen what happened and what happened to Din Djarin when he was found by the Mandalorians, but then what happened to Din Djarin and his clan of Mandalorians, his adopted clan of Mandalorians, when Mandalore was purged, the night of a thousand tears. How did that affect him? Because he clearly has at least 2 massively dramatic and traumatic moments in his life. When his family died, and then when his adoptive culture died, or at least was very severely wounded. Okay, I've been recording for 30 minutes now, and I don't know how long this edit is, so clearly this is a long video, but here's the biggest thing, and what does The Mandalorian mean for the future of Star Wars, and how can Disney/Lucasfilm, how would I like to see Disney/Lucasfilm expand on it? Keep in mind, I'm a warehouse worker living in South Central Wisconsin. So, I am personally convinced that this is probably the best way to keep Star Wars going. This is how you continue Star Wars. This is how you continue to make money off of Star Wars, is through smaller framed stories. You have a guy in Mandalorian armor, but it's not Boba Fett. You have TIE fighters, but they're beat up and they're broken down and they're just not as shiny and new as they were in the original trilogy. You have an evil Imperial, but he was an intelligence guy, and he's a little bit overdramatic, and he clearly, he doesn't have total control of the galaxy, but he's very clearly a very dangerous adversary. I just said very a million times. You know, you have your rebel freedom fighter, but the rebels are gone, and it's clearly not Leia, and it's clearly not any of the like the X-Wing pilots, where they're kind of the noble warrior fighting for peace in the galaxy. No, you just have somebody who was trained as a spec ops, a black ops drop trooper, and she just really likes to kill Imperials because her entire home world was completely obliterated at the start of the Galactic Civil War. So it's all of these familiar elements. It's all of these little bits that give you, okay, we're in Star Wars. It isn't tied to the past. And when I say tied to the past, I mean tied to the fandom's past. It isn't tied to, okay, I expect Luke to walk out there and just start throwing walkers all over the place, just like he did in the he's dead. Or even myself, I've been victim to this, where the rebellion is the plucky underdog good guys, and they're organized, and they're all on one page, and they're just ready to fight against the evil galactic empire, and they've got squabbling politicians and a very rude and short-sighted intelligence general guy, and okay. You run into all of these issues. The sequel trilogy is part of this. The Rogue One is part of this. Solo. Honestly, and this is not scientific at all, but I can tell you why 95% of my coworkers didn't want to go see Solo. I already know who he is. That's what they all told me. I never went to go see it. I saw it on Blu-ray, or I watched it when it was on Netflix, and it was really good. I wish I went to go see it in the theater, but I mean, it just wasn't. I just didn't need a backstory to Han Solo. I don't think it. I mean, yes, there's other things that are involved in Solo's underwhelming box office performance. I feel like that's the real. It's sort of like the kryptonite is, or it's irradiated material. It is radioactive stuff. Whenever you delve back into that original trilogy nostalgia, that prequel trilogy nostalgia, if it wasn't for the fact that this season 7 of the Clone Wars was coming out, or that's coming out soon, if that wasn't already kind of like explained in like 8 or 9 different panels with Dave Filoni on it, I am willing to bet money that a lot of Clone Wars fans would be pissed off with it. If they weren't already prepared and kind of knew in general what was going to go on in season 7, it'd cause a lot of problems. And that's only a few years back is when we got season 6 with the Lost Missions. That's not that long ago. And they need to step away from the familiar. Step away from that era. Step away from those characters, even especially. Because, hell, we're talking like almost dead center in the Skywalker saga. 30-something years. It's like, we're talking like 37, 38 years after the beginning of The Phantom Menace. And 25 years before The Force Awakens and before the end of the saga. So we're talking almost dead center of the Skywalker saga, the gigantic monolith that has been added into Western culture as sort of a modern mythology in a lot of ways. And it's in that era, but we are like 2 or 3 or 4 steps away from the big major characters, the big major plots, the big major stories of that saga. We are away from that. And The Mandalorian is relatively, as far as I can tell, pretty much overwhelmingly well received by the hardcore fandom. I mean, there's still Baby Yoda memes going around all over the goddamn place. I mean, hell, it's been hijacked by a couple of presidential elections already. Or hijacked by independent vendors selling stuff outside of rallies for the presidential election, whatever. It made, in my opinion, I think that Mandalorian made a bigger cultural splash than The Rise of Skywalker. The end of the Skywalker saga. Why? Because the end of the Skywalker saga happened 42 years after the first episode came out. And there's only 9 of them. And people have had all these years to read books and fanfics and discussions with friends, at a bar, or, on the playground about what happened after the original trilogy, what happened before the original trilogy. Oh, wait, there's the prequels. Oh, they're terrible. Blah. Every time you go near anything with that nostalgic, there's good nostalgia and there's bad nostalgia. There's that sense of, if you're touching the actual characters and the actual stories, you're going to run into issues like this. You're going to run into the general people, the general moviegoer not being interested. And because I don't need a backstory for Han Solo. And then you've just got the general aesthetic and the feel. The clunky, weird dialogue every once in a while. The less than stellar acting from weird cameos. Look at you, Dave Filoni. I love you. But the visual aesthetic and the sound design, that is great. Hey, rock on. That's a frickin' flame trooper. I remember them from The Force Unleashed or whatever. But it's just, oh, there's a flame trooper. Cool. It's not, hey, that's Luke Skywalker, who is like, you could walk up to most people on the planet and say the name Luke Skywalker, and they'll be like, isn't that from Star Wars? And I think that that's really what The Mandalorian is. The Mandalorian is, in my opinion, this is the way. This is the way forward for whatever Disney and Lucasfilm plan on doing in the future. It's all about telling good, compelling stories that are true to the themes of Star Wars without using previous material like the Skywalker saga in order to tell it. Anyways, I've been recording now for 36 minutes and I still got to edit this video and I got to record a podcast. Overall, I love The Mandalorian. I absolutely adore it. I'm very happy with The Rise of Skywalker. We're getting Alphabet Squadron Shadowfall soon. We're getting the novelization for The Rise of Skywalker soon. We're getting, in less than a month, literally this month as I'm recording, because I'm recording this on February 1st. This month we're getting the finale of the Clone Wars, which is the end of the George Lucas era of Star Wars, because George Lucas was very involved in putting those scripts together and putting those stories together. It's literally the last thing George Lucas had a heavy involvement in. And I love Star Wars for what it is, and I cannot wait to see it evolve more and more, because we got to see the evolution of what Star Wars can be through The Mandalorian, and I cannot wait for season 2. I cannot wait for the Obi-Wan show. I cannot wait for the Cassian Andor show. I can't wait for whatever the animated series is that takes place after Rise of Resistance, or that comes out after now that Resistance is wrapped up. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to go edit this video. Thank you guys very much for listening to me go crazy all over the place with my thoughts. And I love you guys very much. May the Force be with you guys. Take care.